It's Tuesday, and you know what that means. It's time for another top 10 video. This time, I'll be giving you my top 10 magic items from Dungeons & Dragons 3.5e that I like to see brought into 5th edition. So if you want to see what those are and get a little D&D history lesson at the same time, stay tuned. What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and a few things up front before we jump in. One, huge thank you to my patrons, because it's because of them that this is the video we're doing. One of the perks you can get at the basic tier is being able to vote on future topics for a video. I put out a poll saying, out of these lists of topics, which would you like to see me cover on Tuesday? They suggested, or the number one suggestion was, these magic items from 3.5 to 5e. So if you'd like to get in on that yourself and help shape the future content here on the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. That being said, you would think a book titled The Magic Item Compendium would be a compendium of all the magic items in 3.5. You would be wrong. This contains several magic items, and a lot of them, but for example, everything that was found in the Dungeon Master's Guide for 3.5 is not contained in here. There are certain items that were found in other books, because almost every 3.5e book that was released for the entirety of that edition had new magic items in them. A lot of them are compiled in here, but not all, and a lot of those were reprinted from previous books into this one with updates, so it depends on where you want to go. But the main thing you need to know about this is going to be unique magic items only. And I say that because in 3.5, there was the concept of, like you would see in many, many video games and RPGs and things, of enchanting. You could get a Bane greatsword, a Bane bow, a Ghost Touch bow, a Holy bow, axiomatic bow, a Vorpal bow, or not a Vorpal bow, but a Vorpal sword. Like in 5e, the Vorpal sword is a unique magic item. In 3.5, you could enchant any, I think, sword or slashing weapon to be a Vorpal version of that. Same thing with armor. You could get them made out of special materials. You could get them to do a variety of different things. You could socket in crystals and things that could employ it even further. Very cool, very unique system. Something I would desperately love to have in 5th edition, but I know we never will. So this will only be unique magic items, ones that do not exist in 5th edition. A lot of the main ones we know, like the Flame Tongue and the Frostbrand and all those, existed in 3.5, but they exist in 5e as well. So I'm going to be giving you only unique magic items that do not exist in 5e as it stands, and that'll pretty much be it. I'll also give you a very little bit on each one, how I think it could be employed in 5e. Let's get on with the video. Number 10. Number 10 is the Survival Pouch. I tried to do these, by the way, in a slight order of which I'd like to see, / also order of importance in my mind. And I also want to talk about something as we go through. So you can see the Survival Pouch here down the bottom. Something that I really like that they did in 3.5 that for some reason they did away with in 5th is it tells you how much it is to buy it right here. No questions, no DM having to make up rolls and figure out what weird economy nonsense. Survival Pouch is 3,300 gold, period. Where is it slot-wise? Again, that's not really important in 5th edition because you just have attunement slots, so this doesn't matter. But then it'll tell you what kind of if someone casts Detect Magic, it is a moderate conjuration aura, so they know what kind it is. It'll tell you how to, stuff about activating it. And then if you wanted to craft it, it'll also give you the cost at the end here, what prerequisites you need to actually craft it, what costs it takes, gold, experience points, time-wise, and then, what kind of caster level you need to have to activate it. So that's going to be a thing you'll see across all of them. And we get flavor text here. Pouch looks like it's seen its share of rough use. It's tattered and stained from the wild. But basically, 5 times a day, you can reach into it and retrieve your choice of one of the following items. You can draw out the same item 5 times in one day, draw out 5 different items, or produce any combination up to the 5. Each item lasts for 8 hours or until indicated below, whichever comes first. And the things you can get are trail rations for 1 medium creature for 1 day, 2 gallons of water stored in a water skin. The water skin disappears if it's emptied. A tent and 2 bedrolls, sized for medium creatures, a 50-foot coil of hempen rope, a shovel, a campfire about 2 foot square. The fire can be left to burn or it can be pulled apart to produce 8 lit torches. Each removed torch lasts for 1 hour and reduces the remaining burning time of the campfire by 1 hour. The fire is extinguished and unburnt portion vanishes. A composite short bow, +1 strength bonus, and quiver of 20 arrows. The bow disappears 1 round after the last arrow has been drawn from the quiver. Or a mule with bit, bridle, saddle, and saddlebags. Treat as a summoned creature, except that it will not fight for you. I really like this concept. It's like a simple convenience item. It gives you a whole bunch of useful stuff. You'll never have to worry about food or water ever again. Again, it was 3,300 gold pieces, which sounds like a lot in 5th edition. That wasn't really the case in 3.5. But I think you could probably import that item almost directly as it is, right into 5th edition with 0 changes. Just like the statistics of what it does. Obviously, it wouldn't be a composite short bow. Maybe it's a +1 short bow, or just a short bow. Regardless, right? I think that could come in just fine as it is, and it'd be a fun item for your PCs to acquire. And it would also, unless you really want to give them the whole foraging, dealing with finding food and that kind of a thing, this is a nice convenience item that one player could have or multiple could. Number 9. I should also state that this item, number 10 and number 9, currently both found in the Magic Item Compendium, that book I referenced before. I'll tell you when that's not the case. So anyway, number 9 is the Collar of Healing. A reason I put this on here is, one, it's kind of makes me sad and think about how much I used to love pet-based classes in 3.5 and how they kind of fail in comparison in 5th edition. But the Collar of Healing is a harkening back to a time when I thought things were a lot better. We have an image of it right here. This collar allows you to heal your trusted animal friend at a moment's notice. A Collar of Healing functions only when worn by your animal companion, familiar, or special mount, so that would fit for paladins in 3.5's case. While the creature wears the collar, you always know its exact hit point total, which is kind of a thing that you know in 5e, so it's not a huge deal. This is a continuous effect and requires no activation. In addition, you can activate the collar from any distance, as long as you are on the same plane, to cure the animal wearing it. This instantly heals the creature wearing the collar 50 hit points and removes the fatigue or exhausted condition. If the creature currently suffers from such, this ability functions once per day. Don't think it tells us activation is immediate and a command, so that means you can basically just do it. It's a free action, essentially. So, and again, this is another one that obviously tweaking the word for fatigued, because fatigue doesn't exist in 5e, so you could just do like cures a level of exhaustion or something like that, but maybe 50 hit points is a little too much. But I don't know, this is a good item as well, right? You put it on, you know the hit point total of your animal companion, familiar, whatever it is, and you can choose to, as maybe make it a reaction for 5th edition. As a reaction, you can heal your, whatever the creature that's wearing this up to 50 hit points. It could be, you could treat it more like a paladin's lay on hands. You have a pool of 50 hit points, and you can heal up to 50, and then that way you can use it throughout the day. That may be a little too strong. You could just make it a casting of the Cure Wounds spell, but the idea of an item that's worn by your animal companion or your familiar or whatnot, and then you can use it to heal. The only problem is if this item, I would not make this item require attunement in my mind, although in 5th edition it probably would, because you have a connection to them, and that seems like an attunement thing. I don't know, because it's so specific, the use of it, I don't think it really fits as an attunement magic item. But in 5th edition, technically the rule is, at least I think in Adventures League, which may or may not be the case for regular play, non-Adventures League, it hasn't really been stated, that if an item your animal companion or whatnot can attune to a magic item, I know in Adventures League it counts towards your total attunement slots. So if you have 2 items and you give your pet, a magic item, that has an attunement slot, then they are using your third slot. That may be just, again, Adventures League purposes for balance. And obviously you can rule different in a home game, but I don't think we have an official ruling one way or another. So again, because it's so limited, I wouldn't make it attunement in my games. Number 8. Number 8 is the Swordbow. It pretty much explains what it is, but the limbs of this bow appear to be made of sharpened metal, as if the bow had been crafted from 2 thin, flexible swords. So the base Swordbow is a +1 longbow that could change into a +1 longsword whenever you activate it. It was a free activation, so you could do that, as you want. You can interchange bow and sword attacks as part of the same full attack action, which I always thought was really cool. So you could, in theory, swing with the sword, then turn it into a bow, and then shoot in between attacks. In sword form, the weapon features a bow-like grip and a pommel that resembles the curving tip of a bow. In bow form, the weapon is made of metal, and each limb of the bow resembles a sword blade. In either form, a sword bow has the same +1. And then, again, as I had stated in the beginning, if you wanted to enchant it, you could enchant the sword bow beyond this, but it counted as basically enchanting 2 items, so you could increase its overall thing. If you wanted to give it an additional weapon property, you could do that, and whatever you did, it applied both to the sword form and the bow form. And then, obviously, it would only apply to one if it's something that couldn't apply to both. But what's interesting is there were 3 different versions, right? So there was the Swordbow, which was long sword, longbow. There was the light Swordbow, which was short bow, rapier. And then there was the great Swordbow, which was a composite longbow and a great sword. So a composite longbow in 3.5 was essentially a longbow that benefited from strength, whereas a regular one would not. So this is a +4 composite longbow, so you could add up to your strength modifier, strength bonus, or rather up to a +4. So I like the concept of that. I probably would go for the light short bow, short sword, short bow, rather than short bow, rapier. And then the great sword one, it probably just have to be a long bow and a great sword. Really, there's not enough different variety of bow types in 5e. You basically just have longbow, short bow. But either way, I thought it was a cool concept. It's a great way to help out if you do have someone who focuses heavily on range. A sword bow would be a way they could have a means to go back and forth. Again, you probably would be leaning more towards, I think, the short bow, short sword version, because that would be all dex. But there's no reason that, you couldn't switch this up on a strength character as well. But I really like this concept. There was also one literally called a bow staff, B-O-W staff, that could basically do the same thing, but it went to a quarterstaff instead of a sword. Number 7. For number 7, we're going to the Dungeon Master's Guide, and that is the Monk's Belt. What I'm actually going to be doing, rather than going to the DMG, just because it's easier, is, I don't know if you guys can actually read this, but I'll read it to you. This is the Monk's Belt. This is the Hypertext D20 SRD for 3.5. For those of you who don't know, several books were released for free, essentially, from Wizards. It was the Monster Manual, the Dungeon Master's Guide, the Player's Handbook, and the Epic Level Handbook. And I think maybe one of the Psionic books, I believe, were all basically put out for free. Anybody could use and access those and use them. So here we have this SRD. I'll put a link in the description for this if you want to go check it out for yourself. But it was the Monk's Belt. And really, to a greater extent, that was what I would like to consider legitimate weapons that are items that are tied to a class. We have very few items in 5th edition that are specific to a given class. And in 3.5, you had many things that would just like, hey, this one magic item just ups this class's ability. Like, adds to the save DC of your Stunning Strike, improves your Hexblade's Curse, whatever it was. You could do that kind of a thing, and they were fine with it. And I feel like in 5th edition, everything is very broad spectrum. It's very rare and very few examples where we get an item that is specific to like a class. More often than not, it's like it's for these 3 classes or these 2 classes or whatnot. But anyway, this simple rope belt, when wrapped around a character's waist, confers great ability in unarmed combat. The wearer's AC and unarmed damage is treated as a monk of 5 levels higher. I'll talk about that. If donned by a character with the Stunning Fist feat, the belt lets them make 1 additional stunning attack per day. So right there, it's really great for a monk. It makes you basically 5 levels higher for the purposes of everything you have. If you're not a monk, you gain the AC and unarmed damage of a 5th level monk. This AC bonus acts just like a monk's AC bonus. So if I go over here to the monk, so if we were a 1st level monk and we had a monk's belt, it would basically be giving us the unarmed damage of a and the AC bonus of a 6th level monk. So you would see that right here. That would go, your unarmed strikes would now do a D8, and you'd have a +1 bonus to your AC from that, and then you would also have you'd get the Stunning Fist feat early on, or more than likely you would take it, and then it would give you 1 additional use of stunning attack per day. But if you weren't a monk, you could come in here and get, as your 5th level ability, you could have your, at 5th level, you'd be getting a +1 AC and 1d8 unarmed strikes all wrapped into that weapon, or that item, rather. I thought there was more that it used to be able to do, but maybe that's all it does. But either way, it gives you unarmed strike that's not garbage, and it gives you a little bit of an AC bonus. I thought originally it gave you, like the monk's unarmored, or no, I guess they don't really have, where you can add your wisdom modifier to that, but I guess not. Either way, it's nice to have an item that actually boosts your unarmed strike, as we don't have really anything like that in 5th edition. Number 6. Number 6 is the Healing Belt, and one of the reasons I really like this is because it was only 750 gold pieces, and you got a lot of bang for your buck. So it gave you a +2 bonus to your heal checks all the time. That'd be basically the equivalence of a medicine check in this point. But it had 3 charges that renewed each day at dawn, and you could spend 1 or more charges to channel positive energy and heal yourself. Channel positive energy and heal damage with a touch. You can also use this ability to harm undead, because that was a thing that happened back then. So you could choose to use this on yourself or on somebody else. And it says it was a standard action, so it would be your action to do so. 1 charge heals 2d8 points of damage, 2 charges is 3d8, and 3 charges is 4d8. So for what it was, you got a lot of either inborn self-healing or healing for a group, and for the amount of money that it was a pretty solid investment. I think I would, again, probably keep this similar to how it is. I might drop the +2 bonus to medicine checks, because that +2 bonuses to things is kind of not a thing for 5e, and I might make it a bonus action, right? It might be a little rarer here in 5e, but this has 3 charges. You can use a charge to heal a creature you touch, 2d8 hit points for 1 charge, 3d8 for 2 charges, 4d8 for 3 charges. All charges are renewed daily at dawn. You could do this as a bonus action, something like that. I think that would be a really cool magic item. Number 5. For number 5, we're jumping back to the DMG for the ring gates. This is essentially Portal from, the video game Portal, but long before Portal came out. These ring gates always come in pairs, 2 iron rings, each about 18 inches in diameter. The rings must be on the same plane of existence and within 100 miles to function. Whatever is put through one ring comes out the other, and up to 100 pounds of material can be transferred each day. Objects only partially pushed through and retracted do not count. This useful device allows for instantaneous transport of items or messages and even attacks. A character can reach through to grab things near the other ring, or even stab a weapon through if so desired. Alternatively, a character could stick his head through to look around. A spellcaster could even cast a spell through a ring gate. A small character can make a DC 13, this would probably be escape artist, but probably acrobatics now, check to slip through. Creatures of tiny, diminutive, or fine size can pass through easily. Each ring has an entry side and an exit side, both marked with appropriate symbols. Again, it's Portal in D&D. They were obviously very expensive. Looks like 40,000 gold pieces. So, not cheap, but a cool investment nonetheless, and I like it. Number 4. Number 4 is pretty interesting. It's actually from the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon as part of like a giveaway special edition version of the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon set. Wizards of the Coast made stats for all of the kids from the D&D cartoon, all of them, and then all of their special items they got from the Dungeon Master. And Hank had the energy bow, and Hank's energy bow was probably, it was the best bow pretty much you could get in 3.5. And someone had asked a question. This was also a cool thing, by the way, if you didn't know. Wizards used to be, I feel like, a lot more connected. It seemed like more connected with the fans, even though social media didn't exist. But like someone had asked a question about Caddy Bree's bow, right? So Tom Merle, the Heartseeker from the Legend of Drizzt series. And they said it was actually remarkably similar to Hank's energy bow from the D&D cartoon, and they statted that out. So here's the stats, right? Hank's energy bow is a +2 composite longbow that accommodates a user of any strength. Although unstrung, it fires arrows of pure magical force that deal 2d8 points of force damage. As they are force effects, they do not have a mischance against the incorporeal creatures. It can be used to fire normal or magic arrows, but if you do fire an actual arrow from it, it doesn't get the force bonus. In addition, Hank can use the bow to make power shots. To do so, if you're familiar with Great Weapon Fighter in Great Weapon Fighting in Great Weapon Master in 5e, where you take a -5 to your hit to deal +10 to damage, this was a similar concept called this was a power shot. Choose a number to subtract from your attack rolls up to Hank's base attack, and add this number to the damage dealt instead. Normally, you could only do that kind of stuff as a with melee weapons. Using power attack was a feat that you could get, and power attack would let you subtract a bonus to your to hit to deal a bonus to damage. Normally, again, only dealable with melee weapons. Hank's bow allows you to do it with ranged weapons, and that's a cool concept. I wouldn't mind seeing brought into 5e. I guess we do have that in the sharpshooter feat. So this would, I guess in 5e, this would sort of negate part of the benefit of sharpshooter because it's built into the bow, but I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. Number 3 is Spellmight Bracers, and you're going to see a theme kind of similar to what we just talked about. They grant you the ability to sacrifice accuracy when casting spells. When casting a spell that requires a touch attack that deals hit point damage, you can take a -5 penalty on the attack roll to deal an extra 1d6 damage on the roll. And then it states that a Duskblade, which was a class, can use these bracers when delivering a touch spell through their melee weapon, even if the spell doesn't deal hit point damage. In this case, the weapon, rather than the spell, deals an extra 1d6 points of damage. So this was a similar concept to what we just talked about with the sharpshooter, how we have sharpshooter to take a -5 to hit to deal +10 damage. We have the same thing for Great Weapon Master for melee damage. So the concept of the Spellmight Bracers, in my mind, would be basically doing the same thing, an item that allows you to do that, but with magic. As you know, there's not a ton of attacking-based, spell attack bonus spells. I think it's honestly, I have to do the actual math, but I think it's like 25 or less total spells, including cantrips, that actually use a spell attack bonus. So that's something to consider if you go to invest in an item that gives you a bonus to spell attack and you don't happen to be a warlock. But the concept here would be you could choose, and you could make this like a spell sniper type of feat, something similar, right? You get an attacking cantrip, and the benefit, I don't know what you'd call it. You could call it Spellmight, right? If you really wanted to. And basically, you can take a subtraction to your spell attack rolls to deal an increased amount of damage to your spell attack, your attacking spells damage, rather. And I think that this is a cool concept, too. This, I think, almost makes more sense as a feat than it does as a magic item. But considering they seem very hesitant to introduce any kinds of new feats, but magic items, they're pretty comfortable doing that, we may have to get it this way. Number 2. Similar to the concept of introducing things that other classes get or other things allow, but you can't normally get in 5e, number 2 is the Ring of Silent Spells. So when you activate a Ring of Silent Spells, it creates a silence effect as the spell centered on you. While this effect lasts, you can cast up to 3 spells of 3rd level or lower without verbal components, as though using the silent spell feat, which it was a feat, now it's just a function of the sorcerer, except that the spells do not require a higher spell slot. So that's kind of how meta magic worked. They were feats that you would take, but to use them, you had to cast them out of a higher level slot to gain access to it. This functions once per day. So what this does is it actually puts the silent spell on you in the radius around you, but it allows you to cast spells that would normally have verbal components, which you couldn't do in the area of silence. You could cast up to 3 up to 3rd level spells in the silence. So that will shut down enemy spellcasters that don't have silent or subtle spell, and then it'll let you still do the casting. And I think that's a really cool concept. Even the concept of a silence spell that's centered on a location that could move with you, even if you didn't have spell casting, this would be a useful ring. Obviously, if you do, it's that much stronger. But I like the concept of an item that might give you access to something like the Sorcerer's Meta Magic, which if you're not a sorcerer, you'll never have access to. We're not going to get, again, it seems, more feats in 5e, because like that would be a cool feat option, similar to how like there's the Martial Adept feat for you to get access to some of the Battlemaster Fighters maneuvers, which normally only Battlemaster Fighters can get. And this would be a similar concept of a feat that you would take that would give you access to one of the sorcerer's meta magic options, which is interesting now that I think about it, that the only time we've only ever seen that, right, where a feat gives you access to part of a class feature tied to a subclass, and we only get it in that one. But what's nice is you can get that even by itself, but if you already are a battle master, it's improving your overall ability. And we don't really have feats that do that, other than that particular one in 5e. Number 1. And for number 1, it is back to the DMG, and it's what I'm calling Item of X ability score. We have things like the Headband of Intellect, we have the Belts of Giant Strength, we have the Belt of Dwarvenkind, and the Amulet of Life, I think. There are items in 5th edition that set your intelligence score at 19, your strength score at 19 in the Gloves of Ogre Power, Ogre Strength, and your constitution at 19 in the Amulet of Health or Life, whatever it is. Then we have the other strength belts, the giant strength belts that go above 19 strength, and we have the Belt of Dwarvenkind, which adds a +2 to your constitution amongst other things. What we don't have in 5e, which I think is just plain stupid, are items that do a similar thing, but for other stats. Why don't we have something that sets your dexterity score at 19, something that sets your wisdom score at 19, your charisma score at 19? Why don't we have other items that add a +2 bonus to your charisma, to your wisdom, whatever? It's just interesting that the only class that can gain a benefit, like an item that will give them a very high stat in their spellcasting ability, is a wizard, an eldritch knight, or an arcane trickster. The smallest amount of classes that use the intelligence is the least used stat for casting, because it's only those. Now Artificer is added in as well, but they are the only ones that use intelligence, and there isn't an item that does it for the more common casting stats. So I have right here, I just has an example, right, the Gloves of Dexterity, or a thing you could buy in different amounts, either +2, +4, or +6, that would add a +2, +4, +6 to your dexterity score. Obviously, I don't think that fits in 5th edition, so maybe you have Gloves of Dexterity, and when you wear these gloves and are attuned to them, your dexterity score is set to 19. Same thing with like the Cloak of Charisma. While you don this cloak, your charisma score is set to 19 unless it's higher, or whatever the wording is for the 5th edition items. And the Periapt of Wisdom does the same thing. Right? So you could do that, or you could do something similar to a Belt of Dwarvenkind, where it gives you a +2 to a stat and then something else on top of that. I think it is really dumb that we're almost 6 years into 5e and we still don't have items that boost dexterity, wisdom, and charisma. It just seems like a no-brainer to me. So that's it, folks. That is my top 10 items for 5th edition, or from 3.5, I'd like to see brought into 5e. This was obviously exceptionally hard, as there are hundreds, if not even possibly thousands, of different magic items and magic item types that you could have had back in the 3.5 days. And I know I missed some, and I'm sure you're going to tell me what items are better than the ones that I put in the comments down below, and I'd love to hear them. So let me know what your top 10 are if you're familiar with 3.5. Again, if I was doing things where you could add like an enhancement to an item to let it do something, you know, adding an enchantment to an item, this list would have been huge. And if you're interested, please let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. If you'd like to see me do videos covering like what would my top 10 weapon enchantments be, or my top 10 armor enchantments from 3.5 I'd like to see brought into 5e. We'll see. I don't know what the top 10 is going to be. But like I said earlier on, if you check out my Patreon and do decide that you want to become a patron, you can participate in the polls where we determine what the future videos will be. Things like what the next fixing video is going to be. Things like what the next top 10 video is going to be. And depending on the tier, you might even be able to tell me, I think this should be on the poll for everybody to vote on, or I think this should be a video topic just outright. So hope you guys enjoyed this. I will see you next week with another top 10 video. If you haven't taken a chance to subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. And I will see you all next time.